This week's Torah portion is the portion of Chai Sar, which means the life of Sarah. Interestingly, the whole portion deals with after Sarah passes away. So it's called the life of Sarah because the first verse starts off that Sarah lived 127 years. So based on the first words in the verse, let's say the life of Sarah was this amount of time. But the whole portion is not about Sarah. We know that the name of a Torah portion is not just coincidental because the first word in the portion is the name, but because it is that word, but it's also because it's connected deeply with the rest of the portion also. Go on, David.
Rabbi, I thought you were going to be doing the Torah portions for the last week because we didn't do the last week's. You started that, and now that's this week's, right? Am I right about that?
Would you like to do last week's?
Well, you were doing that. I'm just saying that's what you were doing. So you skipped last week's, and I just
here's the thing. Next Monday, I don't know if I'm going to be. I don't think I'm going to be giving a class at our regular time.
Okay.
We might have time. We might be able to get together, later today or on Tuesday if other people are available. And I wanted to actually meant to bring that up before we started, but we'll deal with it at the end.
You're going to be in New York? I can't hear anything.
Yeah, Rabbi, you're not coming through.
No sound,
Good. Or we could.
There we go.
Now you're back.
Mm-hmm.
I also have something on Vayero, which is last week's portion, which we could talk about, but maybe we should leave that for next week in case we get together.
I just brought it up because I wasn't sure. You didn't acknowledge what you're doing.
I meant to acknowledge that. I meant to acknowledge that based on if we're going to do a class next week or not. So I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm sorry. We did speak last week about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which was connected to last week's portion. So we did kind of touch upon last week's portion last week. There is a teaching on last week's portion which we could do, but because we started already talking about Chai Sarah, let's continue with that. So the portion is called The Life of Welcome Noga, Welcome Anna, and Welcome George and Sue. George or Sue, whoever it is.
Right.
So, George, okay, I hear your voice.
I'm sorry.
Nice to see you, Anna. Welcome back from Australia.
No, we're just on vacation.
I was saying to Anna, because Anna was also away.
Nice.
It's welcoming Anna because she just came back from Australia.
Okay.
So this week's Torah portion is called The Life of Sarah. Even though it's all after her passing, because it's not just because the portion is talking about Abraham sending, a big part of it is talking about Abraham sending a messenger, Eliezer, who was his right-hand man. He was his servant. He was also the student and someone that really lived with Abraham, in not just physically but also spiritually. He was a receptacle of Abraham's teachings. And Abraham sends Eliezer to Haran, which is the place where his family, his wife's family, Sarah, his family, his wife's family, they were from the place of Haran. That's where he'd come out of originally on his way to Israel, and God had sent him at the age of 75 to leave his homeland, to leave where he'd come from. And he left Haran and he went towards Israel and then Egypt, and he's been in different places in Israel since. And Abraham sends this messenger, Eliezer, to go and find a wife for his son, Yitzchak. He wanted it to be somebody from the extended family. So he could go look at the Israeli women that were the women that lived in Israel at the time. There was Abraham had friends that lived in Israel. They were called Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. We learn about how one of them was actually the one who gave Abraham the extra encouragement to do the bris, to do the circumcision, even though he was a very old man. But Abraham wanted specifically to be somebody from the family. And he sends Eliezer to Haran, where Eliezer goes to, first of all, it says that he had a Fitzas Haderech, which means that the trip, which would have taken I think 3 days took him 1 day. Well, it took him even less. It took him a few hours. So God made a miracle that he was able to get to Haran very fast because he was on a mission of Abraham. And he comes to the well. And at the well, he started to pray. And he started to say, how am I supposed to find the right person? I don't know anybody here. May Hashem send me the one. And if the right person, how am I going to know it's the right person? If they're going to if they're going to offer to feed me and feed my to give water to me and to my animals, then it's the right one. And as he's praying, in the middle of his prayer, Terry Mikra, before he even finished his prayer, Rebecca, who was a young girl, she was only 3 years old, according to the verses of the Torah, and obviously people were different in those days. She was a 3-year-old girl.
No, 3 years old.
We had this conversation already last year, I think. She was 3 years old. She was 3 years old. Based on the story, the way it goes is that the way it's explained in the Oral Torah is that the last verses of last week's portion talk about after Akedah, after the binding of Isaac. Isaac was based on all the calculations. He was 37 at the time of the binding of Isaac. Everybody thinks he was a young boy, but he was actually a 37-year-old man. And 3 years, and at that time, as they were coming back, after the binding of Isaac, is when Rivka was born. So why we had the verses that talk about her birth at the end of last week's portion, and now she was 3 years old, because based on all the other calculations.
Okay.
She came with the
Many things in the Bible. I always thought she was at least 13 or 15.
Well, look, I mean, Adam had kids, and Noah had kids at what age, People were different in those days.
Yeah, but who sends a 3-year-old all alone to? Never mind. Okay, that's
what exactly. So she, I mean, she was a girl. Yeah, she didn't have a bat mitzvah yet. So she wasn't yet. We're going to see it soon. She wasn't obligated to do mitzvahs yet. So that actually makes a difference to the whole discussion. So she comes with the sheep, with the flock of her family, of her father. Terah, father, Besuel, and she goes over to the well, and right away she gives water to Eliezer and to his camels. Eliezer knew right away that she was the one who was already. He gave her jewelry, and he told her, and he gave her over she's going to be the wife. If of course she agreed, she's going to be the wife to marry Isaac. And then she invited him back to her house, and he went back to the home of her father, the home of Besuel. In the house, there's a whole discussion where, first of all, Eliezer gives over everything that had happened and how the trip had taken him 3 times as fast as it's supposed to. It was a miracle. And how before he even finished his prayers, Rebecca already came and gave water to him and to the animals. And this was a sign from Hashem that she was to be the one to marry Isaac. We're told in the Midrash, in Rashi and other places, that we find that the Besuel, her father, so in the first he's in the discussion, and then he disappeared, then he's gone. Because he actually was trying to object, whereas her brother Laban was encouraging of her trip, and she wanted to go with Isaac. Besuel, her father, was trying to discourage her from going to marry into Abraham's family. And an angel came and put poison in the food, and Besuel died that night. According to the Midrash. Because later on it says that Besuel and Laban spoke to Eliezer. Later on, when they sent her off with Eliezer, it doesn't say anything about her father. Where did the father go? He didn't say goodbye. So based on this, we learn that he wasn't around anymore when she was sent off the following morning. As soon as Eliezer gets back.
But right from the beginning, it says in verse Nun Gimel, I don't know what Nun Gimel is in English.
Nun Gimel?
Yeah.
Verse 53, okay.
Yeah, so verse 53, it says that he takes out the special of the silver and gold and everything, and he gives it to her brother and her mother. So we don't even know if her father is alive at all at this time.
Well, if you look earlier in the this is a long chapter. If you look earlier in the chapter, you'll see that Besuel is also around.
Okay, I'm reading it right now.
I believe so. I don't have the Chumash in front of me, but I think, yeah.
I'll let you know at the end of this.
You'll let me know. And if not, the question is, where was he? So, yeah.
Maybe he died already.
Maybe. Let's see. Please.
That's the daughter of Betuel. It doesn't mean that he's alive. That's just the way they talk. Okay, I'm going to read.
There's no point arguing about it. We'll check. So he comes back with Rebecca, and Isaac was in the field. Isaac was outside. He was praying. We're told that he actually was the first one to introduce the mincha prayer, the afternoon prayer. Was Isaac, so that he was doing the afternoon prayer. It was Lifnoit's Erev. It was shortly before sunset. And Eliezer tells Isaac everything that happened. Here we have verse 67, which I'm going to share my screen because it's the main verse that we're going to talk about. So let me share my screen. Make it a little smaller. Oops, what happened?
Oh, you're right. There is Betuel. In verse 50, he says, but then it says, Vayan Lavan u Betuel, Vayomru, Me'adonai yatzah davar. So they right away agree. Yeah, I don't know. We can talk about it later. I'm sorry for giving you a hard time, but that the Tanakh actually says that Betuel and Lavan both were in agreement.
Earlier on, right. But obviously that changed. Okay, do you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Here we have the last verse. And Isaac brought her to the tent. Isaac brought her to the tent. Sarah Imo, the tent of Sarah, his mother. Vayikach is Rivka, he took Rivka, which means that he brought her into his home. She became his wife. He loved her. And Isaac was comforted after the loss of his mother. Rashi. We're going to take a look at Rashi over here. Rashi is a commentary who explains, usually he sticks to the simple explanation of what is happening in the verse. If a young child is learning the verse and has a question, let's understand why, let's see how the question is answered. So Rashi says as follows. He brought her to the tent, and behold, she was Sarah his mother, i.e., she became the likeness of Sarah his mother. For as long as Sarah was alive, a candle burned from one Shabbat Eve until the next. That's the first thing. A blessing was found in the dough. That's the second thing. And a cloud was attached to the tent. That's the third thing. When she died, when Sarah had passed away, a few months, sometime before this, these things ceased. And when Rebecca arrived, they resumed. Now, why does Rashi? How do we know this? How do we know about these miracles? And why do we think that there were these special miracles that happened when Yitzchak brought Rebecca into the tent of his mother? Saying there was three very unique things that happened. First of all, the candle, the Shabbat candles that she lit, stayed lit for the whole week. Her bread, her dough was excellent dough. She baked great bread. And there was a cloud, which was the Shekhinah, obviously, Hashem's divine cloud, which was resting upon the tent. Where do we see this in the verse? And I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Rabbi. May I ask?
Go ahead.
did she actually make the dough at 3 years old?
Did she pick up the big heavy things to give the camels water at 3 years old?
That's my question.
Forgive me.
As I said before, that people were obviously different in those days. So we're talking about, when Noah and Adam lived till 900 and something years, and Sarah lived until 127 years, which is not the regular age. And everything was different than it is now. Obviously, we're talking about quite a few thousand years ago. So based on the different verses. So the fact that she was 3 years old, maybe she was bigger, maybe she had, she obviously was able to make proper decisions and choose to become his wife, because a person is not allowed to just take a girl and marry her. They have to be someone that agrees, someone that's got the mind and the ability to agree to the marriage. So she was obviously not as incapable as we might think, even though she was 3. So there was these 3 things, and when do we see them in the verse? So let's take a look if we look at this verse. Well, before we do that, these 3 things come from these 3. I'll go to my screen. These 3 things that happened. So the bread, the candle, the dough, the light, and the cloud. These are also brought in the Midrash. The Midrash doesn't always say the simple explanation of the verses. The Midrash goes into all these different stories, talks about all these different things that happen, which maybe are not things that we can see clearly in the verses. And the Midrash says a 4th thing. The Midrash says that her doors were wide open. So she welcomed people in. She welcomed guests, and just like Abraham and Sarah welcomed guests into the home, she also welcomed people into the home. We don't see that. Rashi does not bring that addition. So why is that Rashi does not bring that addition?
What addition?
That her doors were wide open, that she welcomed her guests into the home.
Maybe it was just the tent was open. It's not exactly a door.
Okay.
Maybe it's expected.
I'm sorry?
Maybe it's expected.
Maybe. The biggest thing is that it must be in the verse we see these 3 things, these 3 miracles, we see them in the verse itself. So if we look at the whole story, what happens over here is Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, went and everything worked out exactly as he had, exactly as he had planned, exactly as he had hoped and prayed. Not only did it work out exactly as he had prayed, it was also miraculous that Hashem did all these miracles, that it took him much faster to get there, and the father who was trying to object was wiped out, and all these other things that happened. That by the time he brought her back, it was a done deal. Abraham had sent him on a mission to bring a wife back for Isaac. Isaac sees her. We see earlier in the verse, she was modest. She was a very special woman, and Isaac brings her in to the tent. He marries her. But if we look at the verse says, Yitzchak brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother. And those words, the tent of Sarah his mother, are superfluous. They don't add to the story so much.
Why not?
Go on.
Of course they add. He's telling you that Sarah had her own tent, and that this way he's bringing Rivka into her space, into the woman's space. And
that doesn't tell us that he married her. That he made the Isha, said that he brought her. He took. The word in Torah for marrying is vayikach. He took. So he took Rebecca in. That means he married her. The verse already tells us that he married her, and the verse tells us that not only did he say that he took her in as his wife, he also says that he later she was his wife. So it's very clear in the verse that he married her. But there's these extra words that say the tent of Sarah his mother. Now obviously there's something over here which is being, and these words come before the words he married her. So again, it says Yitzchak brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and then he married her. So bringing her into the tent was part of the decision, part of the choice to marry her. It wasn't enough that Eliezer had gone and all these miracles had happened, all these things, everything, all the other details. He also had to be some other step before he married her.
Oh, I think I know what it is.
Go on.
So since she was 3 years old, she was too young to be married. So he brought her into the tent, and then he let her grow up for another 10 years before he married her.
Nice try, Noga.
Because then it says, "Vayikach et Rivka," he took her, but tehilo leisha. Then she became his wife, and he loved her, and he was comforted.
So why does it just say the tent? Why does it say Sarah's mother? According to your explanation.
Why did it say that he took her to Sarah's tent?
So he took her into his tent.
But it says that he took her to Sarah's tent.
Right. I'm saying what does Sarah's tent add?
That she'd have her own space. She'd have her own, it's like a room. It's like she has her own room in the house, right? But they didn't have houses, they had tents.
But Isaac brought her in, so Isaac was in there already. So it wasn't going to be her own space.
Maybe there's some maids that she brought with her that took care of her until she was a little bit sure.
I think maybe
She does bring her naked with her. Right?
Right.
She brings people with her who take care
Yes.
I think maybe this is a way of saying that that Rivka suddenly evolved in all ways to take over from where Sarah left off.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. That's what it really means. I'm just being silly.
I know, I love it.
You're actually no. These are the arguments that you're making could make sense, but to a certain degree. But there's other issues. But it says Sarah's tent, and it says that he brought her into his tent, to her tent. So obviously he was there with her. So you say maybe he brought her into the tent, but he didn't marry her yet.
Well, if you're going literally by what it says Vayavi'eha Yitzchak ohala Sarah imo. So he brought her to his mother's tent, but we know his mother's passed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it says Vayikach et Rivka, and then it says he will take her, but tehilo leisha, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So with the Bible, you never know. I mean, they can say one word, and then 10 years can pass from one word to the next.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way until you said that she was 3 years old.
In the Bible, you could also have things that are not in order.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I think Isaac was sort of trying her out. You know, let's put her in Sarah's tent and see what happens. And maybe she lights her Shabbos candles and they burn for more than just the night. Maybe she bakes her bread. Maybe the cloud reappears.
So obviously there was still some kind of decision making that was needed from Isaac's side.
Right.
And this decision was confirmed based on the tent of Sarah, his mother. 3 words, three occurrences. Each one of these words alludes to another one of those miracles, of those occurrences.
Wait, what 3 words?
The tent of Sarah, his mother.
Oh, okay.
I said a bunch more words in English. I'm thinking in Hebrew. Her tent, Sarah, Imo, his mother. So tent, Sarah, mother. Those 3 words.
Yep.
The tent. The words ha'ahela means he brought her into the tent. It doesn't say by Yitzchak ahala, he brought her in. Ha'ahela means the tent. There's a prefix, there's an extra hay over here, which is like it's a prefix to the word. The tent. What does it mean? What is this prefix alluding to? To the fact that this was a unique tent. This was not a regular tent. just another home. This was a tent where the divine, where the Shekhinah, where the cloud of glory rested on top of the tent. If we look back in last week's Torah portion, at the end of the story of the binding of Isaac, where it says, the words are, I had it in my head before, they went to the place. Hashem sent Abraham with Isaac. Hashem said, you should take your only son, take your son, not your only son from Sarah, and bring him as a sacrifice on the altar. And Abraham went ahead with Hashem's mission. It was a test from God. Is he really faithful to God, or does Abraham's love to his child and kindness? Abraham was an extremely kind person. Is that more so than his trust in Hashem and what Hashem wants him to do, knowing that Hashem is telling him the right thing to do? And Abraham, when he took Isaac and he went out on the trip towards the location where God was going to be telling him to make the altar. Obviously, we know, of course, in the end, it was all a test. And it says they went to the mountain, Ha-Hara, to the mountain. What was the mountain? The mountain of Moriah, the mountain where the temple was going to be built many years later. The reason it says the mountain is because of the same reason, the same explanation. As Rashi says over there earlier in Vayera, that there was a cloud of glory that was attached to the top of the mountain. This cloud, which represented the Shekhinah, Hashem's divine being over the mountain, and this same Shekhinah is what he's built. So the prefix, the mountain, was also over here the tent, the unique tent, the tent which had the Shekhinah resting upon. Then the verse says, so we see that Isaac wasn't sure yet, was she really a righteous person? Yes, all these miracles happen and Hashem is telling me that this is the right person, but I don't feel ready. I don't feel, is she really the right one? Is she really as righteous as my mother was, or as I would, the person I'm looking to marry? And when he brings her into the tent, he sees that the Shekhinah, the divine cloud, comes and rests on the tent. Then the verse continues to Sarah, the tent of Sarah. What was something which was unique to Sarah? This is a hard question, but something which was unique, something which Sarah, which we see based on the stories of the Torah earlier, that was unique to Sarah, that nobody else had this special ability. If we look at the beginning of last week's Torah portion, so just after Abraham had the bris, had the circumcision at 99 years old, and he was sitting, he was in pain. The third day from the bris, which is the most painful day, he was sitting in pain at the door of his tent. And usually Abraham always had guests coming in and out of the tent. He was always hosting people. And then encouraging them to bless Hashem afterwards, to thank Hashem for the food. It was a quiet day. There were no guests. Nobody was coming. We're told the reason was that it was very hot. Hashem made it very hot. So nobody would come and disturb Abraham when he's sick. He shouldn't be worrying about his guests if he's not well, if he's healing. Instead, Hashem comes to visit him. Hashem reveals himself to Abraham. And then there were 3 men that came. Abraham was so distraught that there were no guests. Hashem sent guests in the end. He sent angels. 3 angels come, and one of them was going to tell him that he's going to have a son a year later, and one of them was going to go and overturn the city of Sodom, and one of them came to be his doctor, to help him heal. That's what the Midrash says. So Abraham right away, as sick as he was, he went as in pain as he was. He ran and he says he went and he took a cow and he slaughtered the cow and he gave the tongue to the guests and he went and he made food for them. And he was busy cooking and Abraham was standing there. Abraham was taking care of them, like he wasn't sitting down even at the table. He was just busy serving his guests. There's one thing that Abraham did not do himself. Abraham ran it says, where Abraham ran to the tent of Sarah, and he asked her to prepare to knead the dough and make the bread.
Oh yeah, it says it there here. Yeah. Okay.
So one thing which was unique to Sarah, obviously, was Abraham did not have the ability to do what Sarah could do. Obviously, he could make bread. And his nephew who was living with him, Lot, could also, not his nephew, Eliezer, who was his son, could also bake bread. But he didn't have the ability to make the bread that Sarah made. Obviously, it had an excellent taste to it, or it stayed fresh for a long time. So this was unique to Sarah. So the verse tells us that he brought her to the tent, which was the cloud, of Sarah, that she baked the bread. She did the mitzvah of challah. She baked the bread. She separated the challah. She did all of that the same way Sarah did. She had the same ability of Sarah when it came to baking the bread. And then the verse says, Imo, his mother, because what is a mitzvah? If you ask a child, what is a unique mitzvah that your mother does and your father doesn't do? It's unique to the mother. They say it's the mitzvah of Shabbos, of lighting Shabbat candles. Lighting the candles for Shabbat is a mitzvah which is unique to Jewish women and girls. And in a Jewish house, the mother is the one with lighting the candles. And this is something which every child is aware of. It's the thing that their mother does, which is a unique mitzvah that their mother does. So when the verse says that Imma of his mother, it alludes to the fact that she lit the Shabbat candles. The fact that they stayed lit for a whole week, which is a miracle, that does not come from the simple words of the verse. We don't see that anywhere in the verse. That is from the Midrash, and that's why Rashi, in many of the versions of Rashi, he adds at the end a source to the Midrash just to let us know that this is not so clear in the verse, the fact that her candles stayed lit for the whole week. After Isaac saw these three things, then he decided that she's the one he's going to marry. She's righteous like Sarah was. The order was probably different. The order was probably first. The order was probably different than the way Rashi brings it. Rashi first brings the candles, then he brings the bread, and then he brings the cloud. But probably as soon as she came in, the cloud rested, and then she baked the bread, and he only saw a week later that her candle stayed lit for the whole week. But that was a mitzvah. The lighting candles is a mitzvah that one of the special mitzvahs that we're given. So the mitzvah they puts first. First the mitzvah, then the challenge was something that she did, something which actually involved her doing, and then the cloud, which was just an automatic thing that happened when she came into the tent. It wasn't something that she actually had to go and do. Same thing with Sarah. What we see over here is a couple of very interesting things. First of all, we see that Rebecca, even though she was under bat mitzvah, so she wasn't yet the age of mitzvahs, she did the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles, which is unique.
Why?
You know that Abraham,
Children love lighting candles.
they love lighting candles, but if in many communities, many Jewish communities before the war, if you look in places in Poland and Hungary and other places, it was not girls did not light Shabbat candles.
Oh, really?
In today's times, it's become and if we look back earlier on, earlier generations, it's possible that some did, and it's not clear exactly who did, who didn't. But in today's times, it's generally a tradition that most girls light Shabbat candles. But it's also brought out in the fact that Rebecca did it, because Abraham did all the mitzvahs. We know, even though the Torah hadn't been given yet, the Torah hadn't been given to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. We spoke many times how the Avot, the forefathers, they already had a deep transmission from Hashem, and they knew about the mitzvahs, and they knew about the Torah, which is why Lot. Abraham's nephew Lot gives the angels matzah, because it was Passover, even though the whole story of the matzah only happened hundreds of years later. But the fact that there's going to be matzah eventually, they had this divine knowledge. They knew that there's a mitzvah of matzah. Hashem wants us to eat matzah.
They only
We
did
weren't able to draw down the divine energy into the physical being, and that's what we spoke about at length last week and the week before. And we spoke about many times. It's the Hasidic element to it. But they did do mitzvahs, and there was some kind of spiritual experience that was happening when they were doing that.
But they didn't know that they weren't supposed to mix milk and meat.
It's a very good question. Why in last week's portion did he give them chema v'chalal? He gave them butter and milk, and he also gave them meat.
Right. And he cooked it all together.
You know what? They were angels. They weren't obligated in the midst, and they weren't really eating. It was all pretend.
Oh,
He didn't know that. He didn't know that.
I didn't know
That's
that.
a very good question. A lot of commentaries deal with this question. Don't worry. And how did Jacob marry two sisters? It's also prohibited in Torah. One of the mitzvahs, a person's not allowed to marry two sisters.
Right.
Also a very big question. In general terms, there's an answer to that. Whatever, we've got to get off topic. A simple answer to that. But in general terms, they did the mitzvahs.
Okay.
So Abraham did the mitzvah, and it says in Jewish law that if there's no woman in that, if the wife passes away, then the husband has to light the candles. So it's not something that we're exempt from. If there's no woman in the house, then the man has to do it.
I didn't know that. Okay.
So yeah, and we always have a question when if my wife goes away or if I'm away, am I supposed to light candles even though thank God I have a wife, but she's not present in the house. There's no candles in the house. We light candles. So, but the mitzvah is unique to women. Rebecca's candles, she still lit candles, even though her father-in-law Abraham lit Shabbat candles, but it wasn't enough. She had to light her own candles because it's a unique mitzvah to women and girls, and even more so, the whole miracle of the fact that they stayed lit for a whole week was obviously not the case when Abraham was lighting. So Abraham's candles did not stay lit for the whole week. This miracle ceased after Sarah passed away, but it resumed after Rebecca came back. So this 3-year-old girl, her candles, as great as Abraham was, and he was already 140 years old at the time. And all of his years, and it says that Hashem blessed Abraham with everything. He had all the blessings that we spoke about last week's Torah portion, physically and also spiritually. He was on an extremely high divine level. But his Shabbat candles did not have the abilities, did not have the strength, did not have the uniqueness to them like Rebecca's did when she came to the tent and she lit the candles. Go on, Robin.
Okay. It just came to me that, Rebecca comes from Haran, where they presumably didn't follow any mitzvahs. They're not Jewish. They're not proto-Jewish. So she has no experience in lighting candles and probably not even any knowledge of lighting candles. So here she is in Sarah's tent, having never lit Shabbat candles before in her life. And somehow she knows this is something that she should do.
That's great. That is really great. And not only that, she also, her candles also, as soon as she did it, even just the act of lighting, they stayed lit for the whole week.
So the first time she lit Shabbat candles, there was the miracle. First time. Wow. Yeah.
So this is really a message. This whole explanation is really a message of how important the Shabbat candles are, and how we know that we say when we talk about Jewish women and girls, we say they are Bat Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, the daughters of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and men. And boys, we say are Ben, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's obviously often we make that division. For example, when there's a blessing before Yom Kippur, So the different times when we specifically single out the girls as being the daughters of the matriarchs, and the boys, the men, of being the sons of the patriarchs. So this great power of lighting Shabbat candles is something which every Jewish woman has, and every Jewish girl already from the age of 3 years old. And even though maybe spiritually, even though physically the candles may not stay lit the whole week, but the spiritual energy for sure stays for the whole week, and gives very special blessing to the home. So if it's always something to improve in, to make sure that even if we already light candles, to help others, encourage others to light. And also very important to light at the right time, because once Shabbat begins, lighting a candle is actually prohibited. So part of
candles actually what?
Prohibited.
Prohibited, yeah.
So part of respect, part of doing the mitzvah properly and showing it with the proper respect, that's very disrespectful to the mitzvah to light it when it's not supposed to be lit. So doing it at the right time is also very important, and has in it the light of Rebecca's candles and Sarah's candles, and all of the candles of Jewish women throughout the ages. Thank you everyone for joining.
It's a minute, I just want to say one thing.
Before we do it, because it's 12:15, I just want to ask about next week, because I'm going to be traveling this time. I'll just be getting back. I won't be able to give the class at 11:15, but we can meet on Tuesday at 11:15 if that works for you guys. So let me know, please, if you want to.
It works for me.
Right now, just do it right now. It's always easier to do it when we're in person altogether.
Okay.
I can't, but go ahead.
I cannot either.
Oh, okay.
I could do it next week.
Okay, I'll suggest one more time, and let's see if this time would work better for everyone. It doesn't really. We could do 1:50. We could do 1 o'clock on Monday. So we could do 1 o'clock on Monday, or 11:15 on Tuesday.
I can
1 o'clock on either one is good for me.
Yeah, I could do
I can
that.
do Monday at 1
Yeah,
o'clock. But
Monday
I
would be
can't
fine.
do-
Okay, perfect. So everyone could do. Let's do Monday at 1 o'clock. And maybe we want to talk about. We might go back to the year or whatever. We're talking about all these things are interconnected. So the story of Abraham with the guests and things like that. But we'll see if I have time. I'll prepare on another one on this week, or we'll do from last week. But the main thing is that we'll learn some Torah together. So.
I want to
Good,
say
thank
one
you.
thing.
Noga.
I'm just aware that the parasha starts with talking about Sarah's death and burying her, and then it ends with bringing her back to life in a way. So this just came to me.
Exactly. That's why it's the life of Sarah. I didn't say it. I mentioned this earlier, but that's why it's the life of Sarah, because Sarah was brought back through Rebecca. Sarah was brought back. Isaac was comforted with Rebecca coming into the tent of his mother and being the continuation of all of those blessings, even at a very young age. Yeah, very true.
Anyway,
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
see you next week.
Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye.